The whispers followed me everywhere in their world. Gold digger, social climber, the waitress who got lucky. I heard them all, those carefully crafted insults delivered with perfect smiles by my husband's family. For 3 years, I smiled back, nodded politely, and let them believe what they wanted, that I was nothing without their precious family name. What they didn't know? The company their entire fortune depended on was about to collapse without my help. The technology that powered their most profitable division? I owned it. The gold digger they mocked at family dinners was about to become the most powerful person in their world. And when my mother-in-law finally told my husband it was time to trade up for someone from their social circle, well, that's when I decided to let them discover exactly who they'd been underestimating all along. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Sarah Chen, and my story begins not in the marble-floored mansion where it would eventually end, but in a small cafe on the edge of the financial district. I was working the morning shift, pouring coffee for investment bankers and tech executives while studying for my MBA. The irony wasn't lost on me, serving coffee to the very people whose jobs I was working toward. That's where I first met Robert Taylor. Tall, with a smile that actually reached his eyes, he stood out among the usual impatient customers. He ordered a simple black coffee, left a generous tip, and asked my name. Not in the entitled way I'd grown accustomed to, but with genuine interest. "Sarah," I told him, noticing the expensive watch he wore so casually, the tailored suit that whispered old money. "I'm Robert," he replied. "I hope I'll see you tomorrow, Sarah." And so began our story. What Robert didn't mention during those coffee shop conversations was that he was Robert Taylor of Taylor Investments, the family that had built one of the most prestigious financial firms on the East Coast. 3 generations of wealth, influence, and carefully cultivated social connections. I didn't know any of this until our 3rd date, when he somewhat sheepishly admitted his background. By then, I was already charmed by his intellect, his genuine laugh, his interest in my studies and ambitions. "My family can be a bit traditional," he warned me. "Don't take it personally if they seem standoffish at first." Standoffish. What an inadequate word for what awaited me. The Taylor estate stretched across 10 acres in Connecticut's most exclusive neighborhood. The house itself was a colonial masterpiece, all perfect symmetry and historical grandeur. Robert squeezed my hand as we walked up the front steps. "Just be yourself," he said. "They'll love you." Elizabeth Taylor, Robert's mother, greeted us in the entryway. Her blonde hair was immaculately styled, her smile practiced to perfection. "So this is the famous Sarah," she said, air-kissing my cheek. Her eyes performed a quick assessment, noting my simple dress, the nicest I owned, my lack of designer accessories, my overall inadequacy for her son. William Taylor, Robert's father, emerged from his study long enough to shake my hand firmly, before asking Robert about some business matter that excluded me from the conversation entirely. "Sarah is getting her MBA," Robert mentioned during dinner, attempting to include me. "Oh? Where from?" Elizabeth asked, her tone suggesting there was only one acceptable answer. When I named my state university, her eyebrows rose slightly. How accessible education has become these days. "Sarah works at a cafe to help pay for it," Robert added, intending it as praise for my work ethic. "A waitress," Elizabeth repeated, exchanging a glance with Robert's sister, Jessica. "How industrious." That dinner set the pattern for the next 3 years. Every interaction with the Taylors was an exercise in subtle degradation. They never said anything explicitly offensive. The Taylors were too refined for that. Instead, they specialized in the art of the backhanded compliment, the conversation that excluded, the assumptions that diminished. "Sarah," You look almost elegant in that dress. Is it from that new department store? We're discussing the charity gala, darling. Don't worry your head about it. It's just family business. Robert tells us you've quit your little cafe job. Much better to focus on being a proper wife, isn't it? What they never bothered to ask, what Robert himself only partially understood, was that I had stopped working at the cafe not to be a proper wife, but because my own business finally demanded my full attention. Next Gen Solutions had begun. In my apartment, a partnership with my college roommate, Emma. We had identified a gap in the market. Mid-sized companies struggling to implement sustainable practices in their supply chains. Our software platform offered solutions that were both environmentally responsible and cost-effective. The early years were lean. I took the cafe job to keep a steady income while we built the business. By the time I met Robert, we had secured our first major investor and were gaining traction. But I kept it quiet, not as some elaborate secret, but because in the whirlwind of our relationship and the subsequent immersion into Taylor family politics, there never seemed to be the right moment to explain. Robert knew I had a business with a friend, but in his world, that could have meant anything from a hobby blog to a small Etsy shop. He never pressed for details, and I gradually stopped offering them. The Taylors certainly never asked. Our wedding was a Taylor production. Elizabeth took control of every detail, from the venue, the country club naturally, to the guest list, heavily weighted toward Taylor connections. My parents, my father who ran a hardware store in our small hometown, my mother who taught elementary school, were treated with the particular brand of politeness reserved for people considered irrelevant. After the honeymoon, Robert and I moved into a luxury apartment in the city. I had insisted on keeping my own place rather than moving into one of the Taylor properties. This small act of independence had confused Robert and infuriated his mother, but I held firm. "It's important to me," I said simply, and Robert, still in the phase of our marriage where my happiness seemed to matter, had agreed. That apartment became my sanctuary away from the Taylor universe. There, I could focus on building Next Gen without the weight of their judgment. And build it we did. While Elizabeth was introducing me as Robert's wife, the former waitress at social gatherings, I was closing deals with companies impressed by our innovative approach. While Jessica was explaining the family's vacation homes to me as if I'd never seen a beach before, I was expanding our team and opening our first official office space. Robert's role at Taylor Investments grew more demanding. As the heir apparent, he was being groomed to eventually take over from his father. The family's expectations weighed on him. I could see it in the tension around his eyes, the way he checked his phone constantly, the late nights at the office. "The green energy division is my responsibility now," he told me one evening, a mix of pride and anxiety in his voice. "Dad thinks it's the future of the company. I can't mess this up." I was genuinely happy for him. Despite everything, I loved Robert. I believed in his potential to be more than just his family's puppet. "That's wonderful," I said. "Tell me about it." He explained that Taylor Investments had acquired several companies in the renewable energy sector, consolidating them under the green energy banner. The centerpiece was a revolutionary battery storage technology licensed from a company called Ecotech Innovations. "If this takes off the way we expect, it could transform the entire industry," he said excitedly. I listened with growing interest. Ecotech was on Next Gen's radar as well. Their technology aligned perfectly with our sustainability mission. "Have you ever thought about acquiring Ecotech outright?" I asked. "Rather than just licensing their technology?" Robert shook his head. "Dad says it's not worth the investment. The licensing agreement gives us what we need without the overhead." I nodded thoughtfully. William Taylor's business strategy had always prioritized short-term gains over long-term vision. It was a philosophy that had served the previous generation well, but seemed increasingly outdated in today's market. That conversation sparked something in me. I began researching Ecotech more thoroughly, analyzing their potential beyond what Taylor Investments had recognized. Emma and I spent weeks reviewing the numbers, assessing the risks, and envisioning how Ecotech could elevate NextGen's offerings. "It's ambitious," Emma said during a late-night strategy session. "But I think we can make it work." The decision to pursue Ecotech wasn't about the Taylors, not initially. It was a sound business move for NextGen. The fact that it happened to intersect with Taylor Investments' interests was coincidental, though I'd be lying if I said it didn't add a certain satisfaction to the prospect. Meanwhile, my relationship with the Taylor family continued its predictable course. Sunday dinners at the estate became exercises in endurance. Elizabeth's barbs grew slightly sharper as it became clear that I wasn't going to transform into the society wife she had hoped Robert would eventually replace me with. 3 years of marriage and still no announcements? I was pregnant with Robert by this time, she mentioned over dessert one evening. "We're focusing on our careers right now," I replied evenly. "Well, yes. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story." "Robert's career is demanding," she agreed, emphasizing the singular. "Though there's never a perfect time for family. The Taylor name must continue after all." Robert squeezed my hand under the table, but said nothing to contradict his mother. It was a small betrayal, one of many I had learned to absorb. The acquisition of Ecotech proceeded quietly. NextGen created a subsidiary specifically for the purchase, which helped keep our name out of the business press. The previous owner was retiring and preferred a private sale to a public offering. 3 months of negotiations, a carefully structured deal, and suddenly NextGen controlled the technology that powered Taylor Investments' most promising division. I didn't immediately disclose this to Robert. Not out of malice, but because our conversations about work had become increasingly one-sided. He would talk about the pressures of his position, the expectations from his father, the promising projections for green energy. When he asked about my day, it was perfunctory, a social nicety rather than genuine interest. "Fine," I would say. "Busy." And that would be enough for him. He never asked for details, never inquired about NextGen's growth or my ambitions. In his mind, shaped by his family's influence, my business was a hobby, something to keep me occupied, while he carried the real financial responsibility. The shift in our marriage was subtle, but unmistakable. Robert spent more time at his parents' estate, more weekends on business trips that seemed to coincide with Elizabeth's social calendar. Jessica's husband started calling me directly with last-minute cancellations for couples events that Robert had apparently forgotten to mention. I was being phased out, carefully, strategically, with the trademark Taylor discretion. The final confirmation came in late autumn at the annual Taylor Investments Gala. I had chosen my outfit carefully, a sleek black gown from an emerging designer, simple but elegant jewelry. Nothing that could be criticized as either trying too hard or not meeting the standard. Elizabeth had seated me at a table away from Robert, next to the company's aging legal counsel and his wife. From across the room, I could see her introducing Robert to a striking blonde woman who laughed at something he said, touching his arm with easy familiarity. "Charlotte Winters," the lawyer's wife whispered, following my gaze. "Old family friend. She and Robert dated in college, before you." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. Charlotte Winters, from the banking Winters. Perfect social pedigree, the kind of connection Elizabeth had always wanted for her son. I excused myself to get some air, finding a quiet corner in the adjacent garden room. That's when I overheard them, Elizabeth and William, their voices carrying from the small study next door. "Robert agrees it's time," Elizabeth was saying. "The prenup expires next month. Perfect timing." "The settlement is straightforward," William replied. "She gets the apartment and a reasonable allowance. Nothing that would impact the family holdings. Charlotte is ready to step in, Elizabeth continued. Her father is already suggesting some advantageous merger possibilities between our firms. And Sarah? William asked. I could almost hear Elizabeth's dismissive wave. She'll take what's offered. What choice does she have? It's not as if she has anything of her own. I stood perfectly still, letting their words wash over me. Not shock. I had seen this coming, but a cold clarity that crystallized everything I had experienced over the past 3 years. In that moment, I made my decision. Not out of vengeance, though I won't pretend there wasn't satisfaction in the prospect, but primarily because I was done being underestimated, done being the tolerated outsider, done being Robert's wife, the former waitress. I returned to the gala, smiling and socializing as if nothing had changed. When Robert finally made his way to my side, his collar slightly askew from where Charlotte had straightened it for him, I greeted him warmly. You seem to be enjoying yourself, I observed. It's been a good night for networking, he replied, not quite meeting my eyes. Dad says the green energy projections are exceeding expectations. We might expand faster than anticipated. That's wonderful, I said sincerely. I'm happy for you. And I was. Robert wasn't a villain in this story, just a man who had never learned to stand apart from his family's expectations. In his own way, he had tried to bridge our worlds. He had simply failed. That night, as we prepared for bed in our apartment, I watched him move through his routine with new eyes. The careful hanging of his bespoke suit, the automatic check of his phone for messages from his father, the unconscious adjustment of his posture when he thought about tomorrow's meetings. He had been molded by the Taylor legacy as surely as the crystal decanters that bore their family crest. And like those decanters, he was beautiful, valuable, and ultimately hollow. Robert, I said softly, are you happy? The question startled him. The Taylors didn't discuss happiness. They discussed accomplishments, acquisitions, appearances. What do you mean? He asked, genuinely confused. With your life. With us. Are you happy? He sat on the edge of the bed, considering the question with the same seriousness he would give to a business proposal. I'm satisfied, he finally said. We have a good life. I nodded, understanding completely. Satisfaction was the Taylor goal, contentment with one's proper place, the certainty that came from following the prescribed path. I had wanted more for him, for us, but you can't force someone to want freedom when they've never recognized their cage. The next morning, I left early for the NextGen offices. We were preparing to announce the Ecotech acquisition to our investors, a move that would position us as a major player in the sustainable technology sector. Emma met me with coffee and concerned eyes. You seem different today, she observed. Did something happen? I took a breath, organizing my thoughts. I need to make some changes to the Ecotech integration plan. She raised an eyebrow. What kind of changes? Taylor Investments' licensing agreement expires next quarter, I explained. I want to review the terms before we renew. Emma's expression shifted from confusion to understanding. She had met Robert, had endured a few uncomfortable dinners with his family. She knew enough. Are you sure about mixing business and personal matters? She asked carefully. I'm not, I replied honestly. But Taylor Investments wouldn't hesitate to use every advantage in business. Why should NextGen be different? She considered this, then nodded slowly. It's your call. But whatever you decide, I'm with you. The loyalty in her voice moved me. Emma had been there from the beginning, believing in our vision when it was nothing but ambitious plans and late-night strategy sessions. She had never once suggested that my marriage to Robert gave us any advantage, had never treated me as anything less than an equal partner. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert. Dinner at my parents' tonight. Dad wants to discuss something important. I stared at the message, reading between the lines. This would be it. The beginning of the end as the Taylors had planned it. The carefully orchestrated separation, the generous but limited settlement, the graceful exit of Sarah, Chen from the Taylor family narrative. I need to make one stop before the investor meeting, I told Emma, grabbing my coat. She looked up from her computer. Where? To see my lawyer, I replied. It's time I understood exactly what that prenup says about business assets acquired during marriage. The meeting confirmed what I had suspected. The prenuptial agreement Robert and I had signed protected family assets, specifically Taylor Investments and its subsidiaries. But it said nothing about my business interests, nothing about NextGen or its acquisitions. The Taylors had been so certain I brought nothing of value to the marriage that they hadn't bothered to protect themselves from what I might build during it. As I prepared for dinner at the Taylor estate that evening, I chose my outfit with particular care. A cream silk blouse, tailored slacks, subtle gold jewelry. Professional, polished, powerful. Not the look of a woman about to be dismissed from her marriage, but of one preparing to negotiate from a position of strength. Robert noticed the change immediately. "You look nice," he said, a question in his voice. "Thank you," I replied. "I had meetings with investors today." "For that thing with Emma?" he asked vaguely, proving once again how little attention he had paid to my work. "Yes," I said simply, "for that thing with Emma." I returned to the gala, my mind crystallizing into perfect clarity. The music drifted around me as I navigated between clusters of Taylor investment associates and family friends. Each smile I returned felt like a performance now, but one I was determined to execute flawlessly for just a little longer. Robert found me near the dessert table, his cheeks flushed from champagne and attention. Charlotte Winters hovered just beyond his shoulder, a predatory patience in her perfect posture. "There you are," he said, his voice carrying that particular tone that emerged when he was trying to impress someone. "Charlotte was just telling me about her father's new yacht. They're sailing to the Greek islands this summer." "How lovely," I replied, extending my hand to Charlotte. "Sarah Taylor. I don't believe we've been formally introduced." Her handshake was limp, her smile practiced. "Charlotte Winters. Robert and I are old friends from prep school." "So I've heard," I said pleasantly. "Robert speaks highly of his childhood companions." Charlotte's eyes flickered with surprise. Clearly, she had expected insecurity, perhaps even hostility. My composure left her momentarily unsettled. "Charlotte's father is considering a significant investment in our green energy division," Robert explained, his hand settling on the small of my back in a gesture that once felt intimate but now seemed performative. "Perfect timing," I responded, echoing Elizabeth's earlier words, "given the division's potential." Robert beamed, misinterpreting my comment as support rather than irony. "Exactly. Dad thinks we could double our projections with the right partnerships." "Partnerships are everything in business," I agreed. "The right ones can transform a company's future." Charlotte jumped in, eager to reclaim Robert's attention. "Daddy always says you're only as strong as your weakest connection." I smiled at the unintentional truth in her statement. "How insightful. If you'll excuse me, I should say hello to Jessica. I've barely seen her all evening." I slipped away before Robert could respond, leaving him to Charlotte's practiced flirtations. As I crossed the ballroom, I caught Elizabeth, watching me, her gaze calculating. I raised my champagne glass slightly in acknowledgement, a gesture that clearly unnerved her. In her script, I should have been clinging desperately to Robert, creating an embarrassing scene that would justify their plans. Instead, I was calm, collected, almost as if I knew something they didn't. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of small talk and strategic appearances. I made a point of speaking warmly with several Taylor Investment Board members, engaging them in substantive conversations about market trends and sustainability initiatives. These were people who had previously looked through me as if I were invisible. But tonight I made sure they saw me, really saw me, for the first time. Robert and I rode home in silence, the kind that stretches between people who have already separated in all ways except officially. He loosened his tie as we entered the apartment, heading straight for the bar cart. "Nightcap?" he offered, already pouring himself a generous whiskey. "No, thank you," I replied, slipping off my heels. "Early meeting tomorrow." He paused, glass halfway to his lips. "On Saturday?" "The business world doesn't stop for weekends." "Robert?" I allowed a small smile. "Something you should understand better than most." He frowned slightly, thrown by my tone. "Right, of course." He took a long sip of his drink. "You seemed to hit it off with the board tonight. Dad mentioned, Richard Hughes was impressed with your questions about sustainable investing." I removed my earrings, placing them carefully in their case. "Richard is smarter than your father gives him credit for. He sees where the market is heading." Robert's frown deepened. "And where's that?" "Away from short-term profits and toward long-term sustainability." I met his gaze directly. "Companies that fail to adapt will be left behind." Something in my words made him uncomfortable. He drained his glass, setting it down with unnecessary force. "Dad's been running Taylor Investments for 30 years. I think he knows what he's doing." "Perhaps," I conceded. "But the next 30 years won't look like the last 30. The question is whether Taylor Investments will evolve or become obsolete." Robert stared at me as if seeing a stranger. In many ways he was. The accommodating, deferential woman he had married, or thought he had married, had never truly existed. She had been a reflection of his expectations, a mirror showing him what he wanted to see. "When did you become such an expert on investment strategy?" he asked, an edge to his voice. "I've always been interested in business, Robert. You just never asked." That night, as Robert slept beside me for what I knew would be one of the last times, I finalized my plans. The moves I would make in the coming weeks weren't about revenge, though I won't deny the satisfaction I anticipated. They were about claiming my place in a world that had dismissed me, about building something lasting on the foundation of my own abilities, rather than borrowed prestige. The next morning, I left before Robert woke, heading to the NextGen offices. Emma was already there, reviewing the final documents for the Ecotech integration. "You look different," she observed as I set my laptop on the conference room table. "Do I?" I asked, though I knew what she meant. The mask I had worn for the Taylor's was slipping away, revealing the woman I had always been beneath it. "More? Yourself," Emma decided. "Like when we first started the company." I smiled at that. "I feel more like myself." We spent the morning finalizing the Ecotech announcement, scheduled for Monday morning. The acquisition had been structured perfectly. NextGen would control Ecotech's patents and technology, including the battery storage system that Taylor Investments relied on for their green energy division. "Have you told Robert yet?" Emma asked during a break, her voice careful. I shook my head. "Not yet. The timing isn't right." She studied me for a moment. "Sarah, are you sure about this? Mixing business and personal matters could get messy." "They're already mixed," I pointed out. "The Taylors just don't know it yet." The weekend passed in a strange limbo. Robert was unusually attentive, suggesting dinner at my favorite restaurant, asking about my plans for the coming week. I recognized the behavior for what it was: guilt manifesting as temporary consideration. The decision had already been made. He was simply softening the ground before delivering the blow. I played along, answering his questions with vague pleasantries, accepting his dinner invitation with practiced gratitude. The charade was almost nostalgic, reminiscent of our early dating days when he had been genuinely curious about my thoughts and ambitions. Monday morning arrived with the crisp clarity of early autumn. I dressed with particular care, a tailored charcoal suit, subtle gold jewelry, hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. Professional, powerful, ready. Robert had already left for an early meeting with his father when I arrived at the NextGen offices. The energy was electric. Our team gathered in the conference room for the announcement. Today marks a significant expansion of NextGen's capabilities, I told them, standing at the head of the table. With the acquisition of Ecotech Innovations, we're not just growing our portfolio, we're positioning ourselves at the forefront of sustainable technology. The press release went out at 9 a.m. sharp. By 9:17, my phone was buzzing with Robert's call. I let it go to voicemail, focusing instead on the flood of congratulatory messages from investors and industry contacts. The second call came at 9:32, then a text. "We need to talk. Now." I waited until 10:45 to respond. "In meetings all day? Dinner tonight?" His reply was immediate. "This can't wait. Ecotech is a key Taylor Investments partner. How could you not tell me about this?" I finally called him back at 11:30, stepping into my private office and closing the door. "Robert," I said calmly when he answered, "congratulations on the coverage. The business press seems very interested in NextGen's acquisition." "What the hell are you doing?" he demanded, his voice tight with anger and confusion. "Dad is furious. Our licensing agreement with Ecotech is critical to the green energy division." "The licensing agreement remains in place," I assured him. "For now, I'll be happy to discuss renewal terms when it expires next quarter." "Renewal terms?" He sounded incredulous. "Sarah, this is Taylor Investments. We don't renegotiate with suppliers." "Ecotech is no longer just a supplier," I corrected him. "It's a subsidiary of NextGen Solutions, and NextGen certainly does renegotiate when market conditions change." The silence that followed was profound. I could almost see him putting the pieces together. The conversations about sustainability that I had initiated over dinner, my questions about the green energy division, my increasingly confident interactions with his board members. "How long have you been planning this?" he finally asked. "The acquisition? About 6 months. It's a perfect strategic fit for NextGen's portfolio." "That's not what I meant," he said, his voice hardening. "How long have you been planning to undermine Taylor Investments?" I sighed. "Robert, this isn't about undermining anyone. It's a sound business decision for NextGen. The fact that it affects Taylor Investments is coincidental." "Coincidental," he repeated flatly. "Like your sudden interest in our green energy division? Like your conversations with our board members? I've always been interested in sustainable business practices. It's literally what NextGen was founded on. If you had ever bothered to ask about my company, you'd know that." Another weighted silence. Then, "My father wants to meet. Today." "I have a full schedule today," I replied, "but I can make time tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock at the Taylor Investments offices." "He's not going to like that." "I imagine there are many things William Taylor won't like about this situation," I observed. 9 o'clock tomorrow. "And Robert? You might want to read the Ecotech licensing agreement before then, particularly Section 7 regarding change of ownership." I ended the call before he could respond, turning my attention back to the day's agenda. The wheels were in motion now, events unfolding with an inevitability that brought both anxiety and exhilaration. Emma appeared in my doorway, her expression concerned. "Taylor Investments just issued a statement. They're characterizing the Ecotech acquisition as a minor supply chain adjustment that won't affect their operations." I smiled slightly. "Classic William, minimize what you can't control." "Their stock is down 3% already," she added. "Investors aren't buying the spin." "They'll try to arrange a private meeting," I predicted. "Offer to buy Ecotech from us at a premium, probably with some veiled threats mixed in." Emma leaned against the doorframe. "And when they do? We listen, we consider, we negotiate from strength." The rest of the day passed in a flurry of activity. calls with investors, interviews with technology journalists, strategy sessions with our legal team. Through it all, I maintained an outward calm that belied the emotional complexity beneath. This wasn't just a business maneuver. It was the dismantling of a personal facade I had maintained for years. By late afternoon, the story had evolved beyond a simple acquisition announcement. Business analysts were connecting the dots, noting the relationship between Ecotech's technology and Taylor Investments' green energy division. The family connection, Robert Taylor's wife leading the company acquiring a key Taylor supplier, added an irresistible personal angle. Taylor family business drama unfolds in tech acquisition, read one headline. Power move. CEO Sarah Chen acquires vital tech from husband's family business, declared another. I hadn't anticipated the press focusing so quickly on the personal dimension, but I should have. The Taylors were old money, established players in the financial world. Their family dynamics becoming entangled with business decisions was exactly the kind of story that generated clicks. I arrived home that evening to find Robert waiting, a glass of scotch in hand and the Wall Street Journal open on the coffee table. The tension in his shoulders was visible even from across the room. "Quite a day," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "Indeed," I agreed, setting down my bag and pouring myself a sparkling water. "How did your father take the news? How do you think?" Robert's facade of calm cracked slightly. "He's furious, convinced this is some kind of personal vendetta. Because that's how he operates," I observed. "Everything is personal to William. Business is just another battlefield for his ego." Robert stared at me, genuinely taken aback by my assessment. "You've never talked about my father like that before. You've never really listened to me before," I countered, settling into the armchair across from him. "We've been married for 3 years, Robert. In all that time, has your family ever asked me a single meaningful question about my background, my education, my business interests?" He opened his mouth to defend them, then closed it again. "Your mother still introduces me as the waitress who caught your eye," I continued, as if serving coffee while putting myself through business. School was something shameful rather than admirable. "They're just traditional," he said weakly, echoing his warning from our early dating days. "They're elitist," I corrected him. "They decided I wasn't worthy of respect because I didn't come from the right family or attend the right schools. They never bothered to look beyond those superficial markers to see who I actually am." Robert swirled his scotch, avoiding my gaze. "And who are you, Sarah? Because the woman I'm seeing today isn't the woman I married." "Yes, I am," I said softly. "You just never truly saw me. You saw what you expected to see. A grateful, unambitious woman who would be content to exist in the shadow of the Taylor name." "That's not fair," he protested. "I supported your project with Emma." "My project," I repeated. Next Gen Solutions is a multi-million-dollar company with offices in 3 cities and clients across the country. It's not a hobby, Robert. It's not something I do to keep busy while you carry the real financial responsibility. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I never said it was a hobby." "You never said much about it at all," I pointed out. "When was the last time you asked me about NextGen's growth? About our client list or our investment rounds? About my goals for the company's future?" His silence was damning. "But here's what's interesting," I continued. "You expect me to know everything about Taylor Investments. You talk about your projects, your deals, your family legacy, and I listen, I engage. I remember details about your board members and their families, because that's what partners do." Robert set down his glass, running a hand through his hair, in frustration. "So this is, what? Punishment for not asking enough questions about your company?" "This is business, Robert. NextGen acquired Ecotech because it's a valuable addition to our portfolio. The fact that it happens to supply technology to Taylor Investments is a complication, not a motivation." "A complication," he repeated. "Dad, Thinks you planned this deliberately to gain leverage over our green energy division. I shrugged slightly. William gives me too much credit, and not enough. Ecotech was on our acquisition radar long before I knew it was connected to Taylor Investments. Once I discovered the connection, yes, I saw potential advantages. Any CEO would. Robert studied me with new eyes, seeing beyond the carefully constructed image I had maintained in his world. What do you want, Sarah? Really? Professionally? For NextGen to continue its growth trajectory, developing sustainable solutions that benefit our clients while generating value for our investors. And, personally, I met his gaze steadily. Respect, recognition of my worth beyond my relationship to the Taylor name. The acknowledgement that I've built something significant through my own talent and hard work. He absorbed this, then asked the question I had been waiting for. And us? What about our marriage? That depends, I said carefully. On whether you've already made plans with Charlotte Winters. On whether your mother's timeline for trading up to a more suitable wife is already in motion. His face blanched. What are you talking about? Please don't insult my intelligence, Robert. I overheard your parents at the gala, the prenup expiring, the settlement arrangements, Charlotte waiting in the wings. It was all very efficiently planned. Sarah, Let me finish, I interrupted, my voice firm but not unkind. I need you to understand something. I didn't acquire Ecotech as revenge for your family's plans. I would have made the same business decision regardless. But I won't pretend that the timing isn't satisfying. Robert stood abruptly, pacing to the window and back. This is crazy. All of it. You spying on my parents, plotting business moves against my family. I wasn't spying, I corrected him. I overheard a conversation they were having in a public space at an event I was invited to. And again, the acquisition wasn't against your family. It was for NextGen. He shook his head, struggling to reconcile the woman before him with the image he had constructed. I don't even know who you are anymore. That's the point, Robert. You never did. We regarded each other across the living room, the distance between us measured not in feet but in fundamental misunderstandings. In his eyes, I could see the dawning recognition that he had underestimated me. Not just my capabilities, but my awareness of the dynamics at play in our marriage and his family. The meeting tomorrow, he finally said. What are you going to tell my father? The truth. That NextGen values its relationship with Taylor Investments and is open to continuing our partnership under terms that reflect current market realities. He won't accept that, Robert warned. He'll see it as extortion. William sees any negotiation where he doesn't hold all the cards as extortion, I replied. That's his problem, not mine. Robert finished his scotch in a single swallow. I need some air. I'll sleep in the guest room tonight. I nodded, watching as he grabbed his coat and headed for the door. Just before he left, he turned back. Did you ever love me? He asked, his voice stripped of pretense. Or was I just a business opportunity? The question stung more than I wanted to admit. I loved you, I said softly. I still do, in many ways. But love without respect isn't enough, Robert. It never was. After he left, I stood in the silent apartment, letting the events of the day settle around me. Tomorrow would bring confrontation, negotiation, perhaps even a final rupture with the Taylor family. But tonight, in this moment of suspended animation between my old life and whatever came next, I felt something unexpected. Peace. I had spent 3 years contorting myself to fit into the Taylor world, softening my edges, downplaying my ambitions, accepting subtle disrespect as the price of belonging. Now, standing fully in my power for the first time since meeting Robert, I realized how exhausting that performance had been. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Ready for tomorrow? I smiled as I typed my reply. More than ready. Whatever happened in that meeting, one thing was certain. Sarah Chen would never, again, be dismissed as just the waitress who married a tailor. The gold digger they had invented existed only in their minds. The woman they would face tomorrow had built her own fortune, on her own terms. And unlike the tailors, I had earned every penny. Morning arrived with the particular clarity that comes before pivotal moments. I dressed with deliberate care, a navy suit that projected authority without aggression, simple gold earrings that had been a gift from my parents when I received my MBA, hair pulled back in a sleek chignon. Professional, powerful, prepared. The Taylor Investments headquarters occupied the top 10 floors of a gleaming tower in the financial district. I had visited many times for corporate events, always as Robert's wife, a decorative accessory at galas and holiday parties. Today, I entered as Sarah Chen, CEO of Next Gen Solutions, and the difference was palpable immediately. The receptionist recognized me but fumbled over how to address me. Ms. Chen, they're expecting you in the main boardroom. Thank you, I replied, accepting the visitor's badge she handed over, another first. Previously, I had simply been waved through as Robert's +1. The executive elevator whisked me to the top floor, where Jessica was waiting, her expression a careful neutral. Of all the tailors, she had been the least overtly dismissive, though she had never made any real effort to know me either. Sarah, she said, her voice clipped. Quite the splash you've made. Good morning, Jessica, I replied pleasantly. How are the twins? A flicker of surprise crossed her face that I had remembered her children. They're fine, starting kindergarten next month. At Westridge Academy, I added. You mentioned last Christmas that you were on the waiting list. She blinked, clearly not expecting me to have retained such details. Yes, they were accepted in March. Congratulations, I said sincerely. They'll thrive there. A moment of awkward silence stretched between us. Jessica had clearly been tasked with escorting me to the meeting, but her script hadn't accounted for this version of me. Confident, informed, unintimidated by the Taylor surroundings. This way, she finally said, leading me down the corridor toward the boardroom. They're all waiting. All? I inquired. Dad, Mom, Robert, and Alan Pierce, she replied, naming Taylor Investments' longtime legal counsel. I nodded, unsurprised by the attempt at intimidation. Wonderful. My team should be arriving shortly as well. Jessica stopped short. Your team? Emma Wu, my COO, and Diane Morales, our legal counsel, I explained. I assumed this would be a formal business discussion. Was I mistaken? Before Jessica could respond, the elevator doors opened to reveal Emma and Diane, both impeccably dressed and carrying briefcases. Perfect timing, I said, greeting them with a warm smile. Jessica was just showing me to the boardroom. Jessica's composure slipped momentarily as she took in the arrival of my reinforcements. I wasn't informed that you would be bringing colleagues. I believe Robert mentioned this was a business meeting regarding ecotech, I replied. It seemed appropriate to have my leadership team present. She pressed her lips together but nodded stiffly. Of course. This way, please. The boardroom was impressive. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city, a massive oak table polished to a high shine, leather chairs that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. William Taylor sat at the head of the table, Elizabeth to his right, Robert to his left, and Alan Pierce beside Elizabeth. All four looked up as we entered, their expressions cycling through surprise, confusion, and, in William's case, barely concealed anger at the appearance of Emma and Diane. Sarah, William said, his voice carrying the authoritative tone he used in all business settings. I wasn't aware you were bringing a delegation. Good morning, William, I replied calmly. This is Emma Wu, NextGen's Chief Operating Officer, and Diane Morales, our general counsel. I assumed, given the nature of our discussion, having key decision-makers present would be efficient. William's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. This was intended as a family conversation. With legal counsel present, I noted, glancing at Alan Pierce. Alan has represented the Taylor family for decades, Elizabeth interjected smoothly. He's practically family. How fortunate for Alan, I said with a polite smile. Shall we begin? I understand time is valuable for everyone at this table. William's nostrils flared slightly at my redirection, but he nodded tersely. Please, sit down. We arranged ourselves on the opposite side of the table, myself directly across from Robert, Emma facing Elizabeth, and Diane opposite Alan. The symmetry wasn't lost on anyone present. I'll get straight to the point, William began after we were settled. The Ecotech acquisition has created a significant conflict of interest. Given your relationship to the Taylor family, we propose a clean solution. Taylor Investments will purchase Ecotech from NextGen at a 20% premium over your acquisition price. An interesting opening offer, I replied. But I'm afraid NextGen isn't interested in divesting Ecotech. It's a strategic acquisition aligned with our core business model. William's expression hardened. Perhaps I wasn't clear. This isn't simply a business matter. There are family considerations. William, I interrupted gently, I understand that from your perspective, family and business are inseparable, but NextGen Solutions operates independently of Taylor family dynamics. You're married to my son, he said flatly. Yes, I agreed. And while that creates a personal connection, it doesn't give Taylor Investments any claim on NextGen's business decisions. Elizabeth leaned forward, her voice taking on the honeyed tone she used when attempting to manipulate a situation. Sarah? Darling, surely you can see how this appears. Acquiring a company that supplies critical technology to your husband's family business? People are already talking about personal vendettas, about using business to settle domestic scores. People talk about many things, Elizabeth, I replied evenly. That doesn't make their speculation accurate. NextGen acquired Ecotech because it's a sound business decision that enhances our portfolio of sustainable technologies. Alan Pierce cleared his throat. Ms. Chen, there are potential legal concerns regarding conflict of interest here. Your position as both the spouse of a Taylor Investments executive and the CEO of a company now controlling a critical Taylor supplier creates a problematic entanglement. Diane Morales spoke for the first time, her voice calm and authoritative. With respect, Mr. Pierce, there is no legal conflict of interest. Ms. Chen disclosed her relationship to Taylor Investments to NextGen's board before pursuing the Ecotech acquisition. All proper corporate governance procedures were followed. Furthermore, the prenuptial agreement between Ms. Chen and Mr. Taylor explicitly preserves each party's right to independent business activities. Alan blinked, clearly not expecting such a precise legal counter. He glanced at William, who was now visibly angry. Let's stop dancing around the issue, William said sharply. You've made this move to gain leverage over Taylor Investments. To what end? Is this about the divorce? Because if it's a settlement negotiation, we can handle that separately from the business matter. The room went silent. Robert stared at his father in horror, while Elizabeth closed her eyes briefly in exasperation. William's frustration had led him to reveal their hand prematurely. Divorce? I repeated, looking directly at Robert. I wasn't aware we had decided to divorce. Robert's face flushed. Dad, we haven't... Oh, come now, William interrupted. Let's be honest with each other. This marriage has run its course. It's clear to everyone. The prenup expires next month. We can all move forward amicably if we address the actual issues instead of playing corporate games. I allowed the silence to stretch for a few moments, letting the weight of William's words settle over the room. Then I turned to Emma. Would you mind sharing the Ecotech valuation projections? Emma opened her tablet, pulling up a detailed spreadsheet. Based on current market conditions and the integration with NextGen's existing technology platform, our analysts project Ecotech's value will increase by approximately 45% over the next 18 months. I nodded, then addressed William directly. To be clear, NextGen has no intention of selling Ecotech. It's not a bargaining chip, it's an integral part of our growth strategy. As for the licensing agreement with Taylor Investments, we're happy to continue the existing terms until the contract expires next quarter, at which point we'll propose new terms reflective of current market rates. You can't seriously expect us to renegotiate, William scoffed. That technology is embedded throughout our green energy infrastructure. I'm aware, I said, which is why we'll offer Taylor Investments first opportunity to renew under the new terms before opening discussions with other potential licensees. The threat was implicit but clear. If Taylor Investments wouldn't meet market rates, NextGen would find partners who would. Elizabeth, ever the strategist, changed tactics. Sarah, we've clearly gotten off on the wrong foot here. We've always valued your contribution to the family. The pause before contribution spoke volumes about her actual assessment. Perhaps we should all take some time to reflect, to cool down before making decisions that might damage relationships beyond repair. I met her gaze steadily. Elizabeth, for 3 years, you've introduced me as the waitress who caught Robert's eye. You've talked around me at family gatherings, dismissed my education and business acumen, and recently plotted to replace me with someone you consider more suitable. Let's not pretend there's a relationship here to damage. Robert's face went pale at my direct confrontation of his mother. He looked between us, clearly torn between family loyalty and the uncomfortable truth I had just voiced. Sarah, he started, but I cut him off with a small shake of my head. It's fine, Robert. I didn't come here expecting warmth from your family. I came to discuss business. I turned back to William. Let me be perfectly clear about where things stand. NextGen owns Ecotech. The technology that powers Taylor Investments' green energy division belongs to us. The existing licensing agreement remains in effect until it expires next quarter, at which point we will renegotiate terms that reflect fair market value. William's knuckles were white where he gripped the edge of the table. And if we refuse, your terms? That would be your prerogative, I replied calmly. Though I imagine your shareholders might have questions about why Taylor Investments would abandon the technology that underpins 40% of your projected growth, rather than pay competitive licensing fees. Alan Pierce cleared his throat. There could be grounds for legal action here. The timing of the acquisition, the family connection. Diane Morales smiled thinly. Mr. Pierce, I encourage you to review Section 17 of the original licensing agreement. Ecotech specifically retained the right to transfer ownership without impact to existing contracts, and nothing requires continuation beyond the stated term. Pursue legal action if you wish, but I wouldn't advise it. Elizabeth, ever the tactician, changed course again. Sarah, what is it that you actually want? Surely we can find a reasonable compromise without all this unpleasantness. I studied her for a moment. This woman who had spent 3 years subtly undermining me, questioning my worth, planning my replacement. What I want, Elizabeth, is to run my company according to sound business principles. NextGen will offer Taylor Investments a fair licensing agreement when the current one expires. Whether you accept it is your decision. And what about your marriage? William demanded. Is this how you show loyalty to this family? Loyalty, I repeated, unable to keep a note of incredulity from my voice. You plan to divorce me for someone more suitable the moment my prenup expired. You moved assets to protect them from me, lined up Robert's replacement wife, and discussed my settlement as if I were a minor business liability to be managed. And you want to talk about loyalty? The room fell silent. Robert stared at his Parents, confusion and betrayal washing across his face. "Dad?" he finally said. "Is that true?" William shifted uncomfortably. "Robert, your mother and I were simply considering all possibilities. Charlotte's father approached us about strengthening ties between our families." "So you decided to trade in my wife?" Robert interrupted, his voice rising. "Without even discussing it with me?" "We discussed your future many times," Elizabeth said defensively. "You agreed the Taylor legacy needed to be protected. I never agreed to divorce Sarah." "You didn't have to," I said quietly. "They made that decision for you, just like they've made every important decision in your life." Robert flinched as if I'd slapped him. The truth, plainly spoken, seemed to hit him harder than any accusation. "This meeting is over," William announced abruptly, standing. "Sarah, you've made your position clear. We'll have our legal team review all options regarding the Ecotech situation." I rose as well, gathering my materials. "Of course, Diane will be available to discuss any questions your team may have about this existing agreement." Elizabeth remained seated, her perfect posture finally showing signs of strain. "This isn't how this was supposed to go," she said, more to herself than anyone in the room. "No," I agreed. "You expected me to be devastated by the divorce plans, to take whatever settlement you offered and disappear quietly, to remain the grateful waitress who should feel honored to have briefly been part of the Taylor world." She met my gaze, and for the first time, I saw something like genuine emotion in her eyes. Not compassion or regret, but fear. The carefully constructed world she controlled was crumbling, and she had no playbook for this scenario. "Emma, Diane, shall we?" I said, turning toward the door. Robert stepped forward. "Sarah, wait. We need to talk." "Yes," I agreed. "We do, but not here. Not with them." His gaze flicked to his parents, then back to me. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. "I'll come home tonight." "I'll be there," I promised. As we left the boardroom, I could feel the weight of the Taylors' stares on my back. For 3 years, I had carried the burden of their judgment, their dismissal, their certainty of my inferiority. Walking away now, head held high, I felt pounds lighter. Emma squeezed my arm as we entered the elevator. "You were magnificent," she whispered. "I was truthful," I replied. After 3 years of careful diplomacy, it felt surprisingly good. Outside the Taylor Investments building, I took a deep breath of the crisp autumn air. The meeting had gone, almost exactly as I had anticipated, with one significant exception: Robert's apparent surprise at his parents' divorce plans. Either he was a better actor than I had given him credit for, or William and Elizabeth had been even more manipulative than I had realized, orchestrating his life without his full awareness. Back at the Next Gen offices, I spent the afternoon in strategy meetings, reviewing client presentations, and finalizing the public announcement of our integration plans for Ecotech. Business as usual, even as my personal life hung in precarious balance. Around 5, my assistant knocked on my office door. "Ms. Chen, there's a Jessica Taylor here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment." I looked up in surprise. Of all the Taylors, Jessica was the last one I expected to seek me out. "Send her in, please." Jessica entered hesitantly, her usual confident stride noticeably absent. She had changed from her morning business attire into more casual slacks and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. "Sarah," she said, hovering awkwardly, near the door. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all," I replied, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. "What can I do for you?" She sat, fidgeting with the strap of her handbag. "This morning." That was intense. I couldn't help but smile slightly. "One way to describe it. Robert's furious with our parents," she continued. I've never seen him stand up to them like that. Ever. I nodded, unsurprised. Finding out your parents have planned your divorce without consulting, you would be upsetting for anyone. He didn't know, Jessica said quickly, about their plans with Charlotte. Mom and Dad discussed it with me, but not with him. They thought he would be resistant. So they decided to manipulate him into it, I concluded. Create situations where he and Charlotte could reconnect, isolate me from family events, apply pressure about the Taylor legacy needing the right kind of wife. Jessica had the grace to look uncomfortable. It sounds terrible when you say it like that. How would you say it? She sighed, slumping slightly in her chair. They thought they were doing what was best for him, for the family. And what do you think, Jessica? The question seemed to surprise her. Me? Yes. You. Not as a Taylor daughter following the family script, but as a person with your own perspective. She was quiet for a long moment, considering. I think. I never really knew you, she finally said. I saw what Mom saw. Someone from outside our world who didn't fit the Taylor image. I never considered that you might be building something of your own. Because it didn't fit the narrative, I suggested. She nodded slowly. The successful waitress who outmaneuvered the Taylor empire doesn't exactly align with our family mythology. And yet here we are. Here we are, she agreed. She studied me with new eyes, as if truly seeing me for the first time. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not just for this morning, but for the last 3 years. For not making more of an effort to know you beyond the label Mom assigned. The apology was unexpected and seemingly genuine. Thank you, I said simply. Jessica straightened, regaining some of her usual composure. Robert asked me to tell you he'll be at your apartment at 7. He's meeting with Dad's lawyers now, reviewing the Ecotech agreement. I appreciate the message. She stood to leave, then hesitated. Sarah, whatever happens between you and Robert, I hope we might get to know each other better. Properly this time. It was a small olive branch, but one I hadn't anticipated. I'd like that, Jessica. After she left, I sat quietly for a few minutes, processing the conversation. The Taylor family dynamics were more complex than I had realized. Jessica's willingness to step outside the family script, even tentatively, suggested cracks in the Taylor facade that went beyond my situation with Robert. I spent another hour wrapping up work, then headed home to prepare for what would undoubtedly be a difficult conversation with my husband. The apartment felt different somehow, less like a space suspended between worlds and more like my own territory. I changed into comfortable clothes, ordered dinner from our favorite Thai restaurant, and waited. Robert arrived precisely at 7. His tie loosened and his expression weary. He had the look of a man who had spent the day reckoning with uncomfortable truths. Hi, he said simply, setting his keys on the entry table. Hi, I replied. Dinner should be here soon. I ordered from Lotus. He nodded, a small smile flickering briefly. Tom Yum soup and pad see ew? Of course. The familiar exchange felt surreal given the circumstances, like actors reciting lines from a play we had performed countless times before. Now, with entirely new subtext, Robert moved to the living room, loosening his tie further before removing it completely. I spoke with Dad's lawyers, reviewed the Ecotech agreement. And you're right, the licensing terms are clear. Taylor Investments has no legal recourse to prevent renegotiation when the contract expires. I nodded, unsurprised by the assessment. I wouldn't have moved forward if our position wasn't legally sound. Robert ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I had always found endearing, a crack in his polished Taylor exterior. Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. All right. Did you acquire Ecotech specifically to gain leverage over my family? To hurt them because of how they treated you? I considered the question carefully. No, I said finally. I acquired Ecotech because it's a valuable company with technology that aligns perfectly with NextGen's mission. The fact that it supplied Taylor Investments was initially coincidental, though once I realized the connection, I certainly saw the potential advantages. But you didn't tell me about it, he pressed. You kept the acquisition plans secret. When was the last time? You showed genuine interest in NextGen's acquisition strategy, Robert. I asked gently. When was the last time you asked about my company's growth plans or investment decisions? He opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, realizing the truth in my question. Our conversations about work have been entirely one-sided for years, I continued. You talk about Taylor Investments, about your projects, your challenges, your successes. I listen, I engage, I remember details, but you never reciprocate that interest in my work. I didn't realize. Exactly, I interrupted. You didn't realize? Because in your mind, shaped by your family's influence, my business was just a hobby, something to keep me occupied while you carried the real financial responsibility. The doorbell rang, signaling the arrival of our dinner. Robert answered. While I set the table, both of us grateful for the momentary reprieve from the intensity of our conversation. As we settled with our food, Robert spoke again. About what you overheard at the gala, about my parents planning a divorce. And Charlotte Winters, I added. He winced. Yes, and Charlotte. I swear to you, Sarah, I had no knowledge of any of that. Yes, my mother has been pushing me to spend time with Charlotte, but I thought it was just her usual networking agenda. I studied him, weighing his sincerity. So you weren't preparing to divorce me once the prenup expired? God, no, he said forcefully. Is that what you thought? That I was just waiting for the right moment to trade you in? What was I supposed to think? I asked. Your parents were openly discussing settlement terms. Your mother was parading Charlotte around at family events. You were becoming increasingly distant, spending more time at your parents' estate, taking business trips that coincided with Charlotte's social calendar. Robert looked genuinely shocked. The trips were real, Sarah. Dad's been pushing the green energy division internationally. And yes, I've been distant. But that's because of work pressure, not because I was planning to leave you. I absorbed this, recalibrating my understanding of the past few weeks. So your parents were manipulating both of us. It appears so, he agreed grimly. Classic William and Elizabeth Taylor strategy. Decide what's best for everyone, then maneuver people into position without their knowledge or consent. There was a bitterness in his voice I hadn't heard before, an awareness of his parents' controlling nature that he had previously seemed blind to. They've been doing this your entire life, haven't they? I asked softly. He nodded, pushing his food around his plate. The right schools, the right friends, the right career path. Every major decision neatly arranged for maximum benefit to the Taylor legacy. He looked up, meeting my gaze directly. Except you. You were the one choice. I made entirely for myself, against their wishes. And they've never forgiven either of us for it, I concluded. No, he agreed. They haven't. We ate in silence for a few minutes, the weight of revelation settling between us. Finally, Robert set down his fork. Where does this leave us? Sarah? Our marriage? It was the question I had been both expecting and dreading. The events of the past few days had fundamentally altered our relationship, exposing truths about ourselves, each other, and the Taylor family that couldn't be unlearned. I don't know, I admitted. I love you, Robert. Part of me always will. But I can't go back to being the version of Sarah who dimmed her light to avoid overshadowing her husband, who accepted subtle disrespect as the cost of belonging to your world. I never wanted you to dim your light, he protested. Maybe not. Consciously, I conceded. But you were comfortable with the dynamic, with your family dismissing my achievements, with treating my business as a hobby, with me playing the role of supportive wife while your career took center stage. He couldn't deny it, and to his credit, he didn't try. I've been blind, he said instead, to their manipulation, to your frustration, to the reality of our marriage. Yes, I agreed. You have. Can we fix this? He asked, vulnerability naked in his expression. Now that everything's out in the open, can we build something different? Something better? I considered his question carefully. I don't know. It would mean fundamental changes, Robert, not just in how we relate to each other, but in your relationship with your family, your approach to your career, your entire worldview. I'm willing to try, he said with unexpected intensity. Today, for the first time in my life, I stood up to my father, told him he was wrong, walked out of a Taylor Investments meeting because I disagreed with their position. Do you have any idea how liberating that felt? I couldn't help but smile slightly. Actually, I think I do. Then help me, he urged, reaching across the table to take my hand. Help me break free of their control, of the Taylor script I've been following my entire life. I want to write my own story, Sarah. With you, if you'll give me another chance. His sincerity was palpable, his desperation to save our marriage evident in every word. 3 days ago, it would have been exactly what I wanted to hear. Now, I found myself hesitating. It won't be easy, I warned. Your parents won't simply accept this new version of Robert who makes his own decisions, who prioritizes his wife over the family agenda. I know, he acknowledged. They'll fight it, every step of the way, use every emotional lever they have, probably threaten my position at Taylor Investments. Are you prepared for that? He squeezed my hand. With you by my side? Yes. I wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that the events of the past few days had truly transformed him, awakened him to his parents' manipulation and his own complicity in it. But doubt lingered, fertilized by 3 years of watching him bend to his family's will. We need time, I said finally. Time to figure out what our relationship looks like now, with everything in the open. Time for you to prove that this change is real and lasting, not just a reaction to today's revelations. Disappointment flickered across his face, but he nodded. That's fair. Whatever you need, Sarah. And the business situation needs to remain separate, I added firmly. NextGen will proceed with its plans for ecotech. When the licensing agreement with Taylor Investments expires, we'll propose new terms based on market value, not personal relationships. I understand, he said. I'll recuse myself from any Taylor Investments discussions regarding ecotech to avoid conflicts of interest. It was a mature response, one that acknowledged the complexity of our situation rather than demanding simple solutions. Perhaps there was hope for a new Robert after all. Where will you stay tonight? I asked. He hesitated. I could take the guest room again. I considered this, then shook my head. I think we both need space to process everything that's happened. Maybe you should stay at your apartment in the city for a while. The disappointment was clearer this time, but he accepted my decision. All right, I'll pack a bag. As he moved toward the bedroom, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma. You need to see this. Check your email. I opened my laptop and found Emma's message with a link to a financial news site. The headline made my stomach drop. Taylor family. Feud erupts over tech acquisition. Sources say CEO son sides with wife against family legacy. The article detailed, with surprising accuracy, the morning's confrontation at Taylor Investments, citing anonymous sources who claimed Robert had openly defied his father and threatened to resign if the company pursued legal action against NextGen. Robert, I called, my voice tight. You should see this. He emerged from the bedroom, a small overnight bag in hand. "What is it?" I turned the laptop toward him. His face paled as he read the headline, then flushed with anger as he skimmed the article. "This is from Inside Taylor Investments," he said, voice rising. "These details, about the meeting, about what I said to Dad afterward, this had to come from someone in the boardroom." "Or from your parents," I suggested. He shook his head. "They would never air family business publicly. It goes against everything they stand for." "Unless it serves a purpose," I countered. "Think about it, Robert. What better way to force you back in line than to make it seem like you've betrayed the family publicly? They're applying pressure, creating a narrative that you'll feel compelled to correct." He stared at me, the realization dawning slowly. "By tomorrow, they'll expect me to issue a statement supporting Taylor Investments, disavowing any conflict, with my father presenting a united family front." "Exactly. And if I don't, then you confirm the family feud narrative, potentially damaging Taylor Investments' stock price and your own position within the company." Robert sank onto the couch, the bag slipping from his fingers. "They're still doing it, still manipulating, still pulling strings, just with higher stakes." I sat beside him, not touching but close enough to offer support. "This is what breaking free of their control looks like, Robert. It's messy and painful in public. Are you sure you're ready for it?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring at the damning headline. Then, with surprising resolve, he reached for his phone. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Calling Jessica," he replied, dialing. "She's the only one in the family I still trust. I need to know if she was part of this." The call connected, and he put it on speaker. "Jess, it's me. Have you seen the article about the Taylor family feud?" "I'm looking at it right now," she replied, her voice tight. "It's bad, Rob." "Did you know about it? Did they plan this?" A pause. "Not exactly. But after you left Dad's office, he was furious. Said if you wanted to side against the family, you could deal with the consequences." "So he leaked it," Robert confirmed, his voice flat. "Not personally," Jessica clarified, "but he told Alan Pierce to manage the narrative. I think this is what he meant." Robert closed his eyes briefly. "Thanks, Jess. I needed to know." "Rob, listen," Jessica said urgently. "Dad's called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. I think he's going to try to have you removed from the green energy division. Maybe from the company entirely." "He can't do that," Robert protested. "I built that division from nothing. He's convincing the board it's a conflict of interest now that your wife controls Ecotech. Says you can't be objective about renegotiating the licensing terms." I could see the shock and betrayal washing over Robert's face, but beneath it, something else was emerging, a steely determination I had rarely witnessed in him. "Let him try," he said finally. "Thanks for the warning, Jess." After ending the call, Robert sat in silence for several minutes, processing this latest development. I waited, giving him space to work through what it meant. "All my life," he eventually said, his voice quiet but steady, "I've followed their rules, done what was expected of the Taylor heir, put the family legacy above my own desires, my own happiness. And the one time I stand up for what I believe is right, they try to destroy me." "I'm sorry, Robert," I said softly. He shook his head. "Don't be. For the first time, I'm seeing them clearly, seeing the price of being a good Taylor." He looked at me, his expression resolute. "I won't issue a statement. I won't apologize for defending you, for questioning their decisions. Let them call their board meeting. Let them try to force me out." "What will you do?" A smile, small but genuine, touched his lips. "Something I should have done years ago. Write my own story." As he spoke those words, I felt a shift between Us? Subtle, but significant. This wasn't just about our marriage anymore. This was about Robert finally claiming his own identity, separate from the Taylor legacy, from his parents' expectations, from the script he had followed his entire life. Whether our relationship could survive these seismic changes remained uncertain. But in this moment, watching Robert choose his own path for perhaps the first time in his life, I felt something I hadn't expected. Hope. "Whatever happens tomorrow," I said, "know that I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself, for questioning a system you've been part of your entire life." He reached for my hand, and this time I didn't pull away. "I couldn't have done it without you, Sarah. You showed me what real strength looks like." As he gathered his things to leave for his city apartment, there was a new purpose in his movements, a certainty that hadn't been there before. The Robert who walked out the door that evening was not the same man who had entered it, nor was I the same woman who had once dimmed her light to fit into the Taylor world. We had both been transformed by truth, painful as it was. Where that transformation would lead us, together or apart, remained to be seen. After Robert left, I poured myself a glass of wine and moved to the window, looking out at the city lights. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: the media fallout from the Family Feud story, the Taylor Investments Board meeting, the continuing integration of ecotech into NextGen's operations. But tonight, in this moment of quiet reflection, I allowed myself to acknowledge what I had achieved. Not just professionally, though NextGen's acquisition of ecotech was certainly a business triumph, but personally, standing tall in my truth, refusing to be diminished by others' expectations, reclaiming my power after years of subtle submission. The gold digger they had imagined never existed. The woman who had emerged instead was far more formidable than anything they could have anticipated. And she was just getting started. Morning arrived with the sharp clarity that follows sleepless nights. I had spent hours reviewing the media coverage of the Taylor Family Feud, watching as financial analysts speculated about the impact on Taylor Investments' stock price, and business reporters crafted increasingly dramatic narratives about the personal drama behind the corporate maneuvers. By 7 a.m., I had already fielded calls from 3 NextGen board members, assuring them that the company's acquisition strategy remained sound despite the personal complications. Emma had texted a simple message of support: "Standing by, whatever you need." What I needed was coffee, perspective, and a clear head to navigate the day ahead. I dressed with particular care: a charcoal suit with subtle burgundy accents, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back in a sleek chignon, armor for the battlefield that awaited. My phone rang just as I was leaving the apartment. Robert's name flashed on the screen. "Good morning," I answered, keeping my tone neutral. "Sarah." His voice was tight with tension. "Have you seen the journal?" "I've seen most of the coverage." "Which piece specifically?" "Front page of the business section. Taylor air faces. Ouster over wife's business move." I closed my eyes briefly. I haven't seen that one yet. It quotes sources close to the board, saying there's a movement to remove me from my position due to the conflict of interest created by your acquisition. "I'm sorry, Robert." "Don't be," he said, surprising me with the steadiness in his voice. I spent half the night furious, the other half thinking. This is exactly how they operate, using pressure, manipulation, public humiliation to force compliance. And now? Now I'm done playing their game. He took an audible breath. "I'm resigning from Taylor Investments." The declaration shocked me into momentary silence. "Robert, are you sure?" "More sure than I've been about anything in a long time," he replied. "The board meeting is at 9. I'm going to walk in, submit my resignation, and walk out. No negotiation, no drama." "What will you do?" I could almost hear his smile through the phone. "Start over. Build something that's actually mine, not just another piece of the Taylor legacy." Your parents will fight this, I warned. Let them, he said simply. They can't force me to work for the family business. No, but they can make things difficult in other ways. I know. But I'm done letting fear of their disapproval dictate my life. Something had shifted in Robert, a fundamental change, in how he saw himself in relation to his family. Whether it would last remained to be seen, but in this moment, his resolve seemed genuine. Where are you now? I asked. At my city apartment, getting ready to head to the office. Why? I'd like to see you before the board meeting, if possible. A pause. Yes, I'd like that too. Coffee at Westfield's in 30 minutes? I'll be there. Westfield's was a small cafe halfway between our apartment and the Taylor Investments building, a neutral territory where we had often met for quick coffees during busy workdays. When I arrived, Robert was already seated at a corner table, fingers drumming nervously against his cup. He looked up as I approached, his expression lightening. You came. Of course I came, I replied, setting down my bag and signaling the waitress for coffee. This is a big decision, Robert. I wanted to make sure you've thought it through. I have, he assured me. Possibly for the first time in my life, I've made a decision based entirely on what I want, not what's expected of me. And what do you want? He met my gaze directly. A chance to discover who I am outside of the Taylor name. An opportunity to build something meaningful on my own terms. He hesitated. And if possible, a second chance with my wife. The waitress arrived with my coffee, giving me a moment to absorb his words. When she left, I responded carefully. I appreciate the sentiment, Robert. But let's be realistic. You're about to go through a major life transition. Your identity, your career, your relationship with your family, everything's changing at once. Adding the pressure of rebuilding our marriage might be too much right now. Disappointment flickered across his face, but he nodded. I understand. And you're right. I need to figure out who Robert is without the Taylor context before I can be a good partner to anyone. His self-awareness surprised me. This was a new side of Robert, reflective, realistic, willing to acknowledge his own limitations. That said, he continued, I hope we can at least remain in contact. Not just about the business situation, but as friends. I value your perspective, Sarah, more than I've probably shown. I'd like that, I agreed. Friends. He smiled, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. So, as my friend, any advice for a soon-to-be unemployed ex-heir with an Ivy League business degree and zero real-world experience? I couldn't help but laugh at his self-deprecating description. You're selling yourself short. You built the green energy division from the ground up. That required vision, leadership, and business acumen, all transferable skills. Skills I'll need since I'm about to be cut off financially as well as professionally. I raised an eyebrow. Are you concerned about money? He shrugged slightly. I have savings, and the apartment is in my name. I'll be fine in the short term, but longer term. Let's just say the Taylor lifestyle doesn't prepare you for actual budgeting. You'll adapt, I said with more confidence than I felt. The Robert I had known had never balanced a checkbook or comparison shopped for anything in his life. He glanced at his watch. I should go. The board meeting starts in 20 minutes, and I want to be there early to avoid any dramatic confrontations in the hallway. I reached across the table to squeeze his hand briefly. Good luck. Whatever happens in there, remember why you're doing this. For myself, he said firmly. Not out of spite, not to hurt my parents, but because it's the right choice for me. As he stood to leave, he hesitated. Would you like to have dinner tonight? To debrief after all this is over? I'd like that, I replied. Text me when you're done, and we'll figure out a time and place. After he left, I sat nursing my coffee, processing the unexpected turn of events. When I had overheard Elizabeth and William planning my replacement, I could never have imagined it would lead to Robert breaking free of the Taylor empire entirely. Whether his newfound independence would last remained to be seen, but I found myself hoping, for his sake as much as mine, that it would. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Board meeting leaked to press. Reporters gathering outside Taylor Investments. You may want to prepare a statement about potential impact on next-gen ecotech plans. I sighed, finishing my coffee and gathering my things. The public spectacle was beginning, and next-gen would inevitably be drawn into it. I needed to get to the office and coordinate our response before speculation damaged our stock price or client relationships. The next-gen headquarters buzzed with unusual energy when I arrived. My assistant intercepted me immediately, tablet in hand. Ms. Chen, we've had 17 press inquiries already this morning about the Taylor situation. The communications team has drafted a statement emphasizing that our acquisition of Ecotech was a strategic business decision unrelated to personal matters. They need your approval before releasing it. Tell them I'll review it within the hour, I replied, heading toward my office. And Jenny? No calls for the next 30 minutes, please. I need to gather my thoughts. Of course, she agreed. Except, Ms. Taylor is waiting in your office. I stopped short. Elizabeth? No, Jessica. Surprised, I continued to my office, finding Robert's sister perched nervously on the edge of a chair, still in the outfit she'd worn to the board meeting, a conservative navy suit that screamed Taylor Investments. She stood as I entered. Sarah, I'm sorry to ambush you like this. It's fine, I assured her, setting down my bag. What brings you here? Shouldn't you be at the board meeting? It's over, she said simply. Or at least the important part is. Already? It's barely been 30 minutes. Jessica's composure cracked slightly, a rueful smile breaking through. Robert didn't exactly follow the script. He walked in, handed Dad his written resignation, wished everyone well, and walked out before anyone could respond. The shortest Taylor Investments board presentation in history. Despite everything, I found myself smiling at the image. How did William take it? Not well, she admitted. At first, he thought it was a negotiating tactic, that Robert was trying to force concessions about the Ecotech situation. When he realized Robert was serious, she trailed off, shaking her head. Let me guess. Anger, threats, attempts to pressure him into changing his mind? All of that, plus bringing up every obligation Robert has to the family legacy, every sacrifice previous generations made, every advantage he's enjoyed as a Taylor. And Robert? Left anyway, Jessica said, a note of pride in her voice. I've never seen anything like it. He just let all of Dad's words wash over him and kept walking. I nodded, unsurprised. The Robert who had faced me over coffee. That morning had been different, centered, resolved, clear-eyed about his decision. Why are you here, Jessica? I asked gently. She took a deep breath. 2 reasons. First, to warn you that Dad is, well, furious doesn't begin to cover it. He's convinced this is all you're doing. That you've manipulated Robert into betraying the family as revenge for how they treated you. And the second reason? To tell you I don't believe that, she said firmly. I was there for all of it, Sarah. I watched them dismiss you, underestimate. You treat you as temporary and unimportant. I did it too, she admitted, her voice softening with regret. But I also saw how you responded, with dignity, with intelligence, with quiet persistence. You're not vindictive. You're just formidable. The word hung between us. An acknowledgement of respect I had never expected from any Taylor except Robert. Thank you, I said simply. Jessica nodded, then pressed on, her practical nature reasserting itself. Dad's already instructing our PR team to craft a narrative about Robert taking a leave of absence to explore new opportunities. He wants to control the story, minimize any appearance of family conflict that might affect the stock price. Which means he'll also be looking to resolve the Ecotech situation quickly and quietly, I concluded. Exactly. Expect a call from his team, probably today. They'll want to negotiate new licensing terms immediately, rather than waiting for the current agreement to expire to put this whole situation to rest. I considered this new information. Is William prepared to pay fair market value? He's prepared to pay whatever it takes to make this disappear from the business press, Jessica replied. Use that. Her blunt advice, essentially telling me to leverage her father's vulnerability, was unexpected. Whose side are you on here, Jessica? She smiled faintly. For the first time in my life, my own. I've watched Robert break free of Dad's control, and it's inspiring. I have a family of my own now. Priorities beyond preserving the Taylor. Mystique at all costs. This was a side of Jessica I had never seen. Thoughtful, independent, perhaps even a potential ally. One more thing, she added, standing to leave. Robert mentioned you're having dinner tonight. He's nervous about it. Changed his tie 3 times before the board meeting. Whatever you decide about your marriage, be gentle with him. He's braver than I gave him credit for, but he's also stepping into completely uncharted territory. I will, I promised. And Jessica? Thank you for coming. It means a lot. After she left, I sat at my desk, processing everything that had happened in the past 24 hours. The situation was evolving faster than I had anticipated, with Robert's resignation fundamentally changing the dynamics between NextGen, Taylor Investments, and the Taylor family. I spent the morning in strategy sessions with Emma, Diane, and our communication team, crafting careful responses to media inquiries and preparing for the inevitable call from William's team about the Ecotech licensing agreement. It came shortly, after lunch, Alan Pierce himself requesting a meeting at my earliest convenience to discuss mutually beneficial modifications to the existing contract. We set the meeting for the following morning, giving me time to consult with our legal team and prepare a comprehensive proposal that would protect NextGen's interests, while offering Taylor Investments a face-saving resolution to the public relations challenge. By late afternoon, the business press had caught up to the reality of Robert's resignation. Taylor Air exits family business amid tech acquisition controversy, read one headline. Next generation clash. Taylor's son resigns after wife's company. Acquires key supplier, declared another. Through it all, I maintained a careful professional distance in my public statements, emphasizing that NextGen's acquisition strategy was based on sound business principles independent of any personal connections. Robert texted around 5. It's done. Desk cleared. Security badge turned in. Final paperwork signed. Dinner at 7. Your choice of restaurant. I suggested a quiet bistro far from the financial district, a place where neither of us was likely to encounter business associates or Taylor family connections. When I arrived, Robert was already seated at a corner table, looking simultaneously exhausted and exhilarated. You did it, I said as I sat across from him. I did, he agreed, his smile genuine despite the weariness in his eyes. It was intense, but also freeing. Walking out of that building felt like shedding a skin I've been trapped in my entire life. We ordered wine, and as we waited for our food, Robert detailed the day's events, the shocked expressions at the board meeting, his father's fury, the HR exit interview where the manager couldn't quite look him in the eye. They all kept waiting for me to change my mind, he marveled, as if this had to be some elaborate negotiating tactic because no one would actually choose to walk away from the Taylor name and fortune. And has it sunk in yet? What you've done? He considered the question seriously. Not entirely. I keep having moments of panic, wondering if I've made a massive mistake. Then I remember how it felt making this decision for myself, and the panic recedes. That's normal, I assured him. You've made a life-changing choice. It would be strange if you didn't have moments of doubt. Jessica texted that she came to see you, he mentioned, changing the subject slightly. What did you think? I smiled. I think your sister might be having her own quiet rebellion against the Taylor doctrine. She warned me about your father's plans to resolve the ecotech situation quickly. That sounds like Jess, he agreed. Always practical, even in the middle of family drama. Our food arrived, and as we ate, the conversation drifted to lighter topics. Memories of our early dating days, before the Taylor family complications had overshadowed our relationship, shared jokes about particularly pretentious social events we'd endured together. It was the most natural, relaxed interaction we'd had in months, perhaps even years. Without the weight of the Taylor expectations pressing down on both of us, something had shifted in our dynamic. Over dessert, Robert broached the subject we had both been dancing around. Where does this leave us, Sarah? Our marriage? I set down my fork, considering my words carefully. I don't know yet. So much has changed so quickly. I think we both need time to adjust to our new reality before making any decisions about our relationship. He nodded, accepting this answer with a maturity that continued to surprise me. Fair enough. For what it's worth, I'd like to try again. With the real Sarah, not the version of you I allowed my family to diminish. But I understand if that's not what you want. It's not a question of wanting or not wanting, I explained. It's about whether we can build something healthy and equal after everything that's happened. Whether you can truly break free of the Taylor mindset, not just the Taylor business. I understand, he said quietly. And I'm willing to do that work, however long it takes. As we left the restaurant, Robert hesitated on the sidewalk. This is going to sound strange, but I don't know where to go now. The city apartment has always been just a place to crash when working late. It doesn't feel like home. And our apartment does? I asked gently. He shook his head. Not anymore. That was part of the Taylor life too, in many ways. I made a decision then, one based on compassion rather than obligation. The guest room is still available, just until you figure out your next steps. Relief washed over his face. Thank you. I promise not to impose for long. We shared a cab back to the apartment, the silence between us comfortable rather than strained. As Robert settled into the guest room, I found myself reflecting on the day's events from my bedroom across the hall. The gold digger they had labeled me, the social climber they had dismissed. That fictional woman had supposedly married Robert for his money, for the Taylor name, for access to their world. The irony that Robert had now walked away from all of those things, that I was the one offering him shelter in the aftermath, was not lost on me. The next morning brought a flurry of activity. The meeting with Alan Pierce and the Taylor Investments team went exactly as Jessica had predicted. They were prepared to pay a premium for a quick, quiet resolution to the ecotech licensing situation. NextGen emerged with a significantly improved agreement, higher licensing fees, expanded usage rights for Taylor Investments, and a public statement about strengthening the partnership between our organizations that would help calm investor concerns. William Taylor was notably absent from the negotiations, sending Alan and the CFO in his place. It was a sullen capitulation, an acknowledgement that in this particular battle, I had emerged victorious. When I returned to the apartment that evening, I found Robert in the kitchen, attempting to cook dinner, something I had never seen him do in our entire relationship. "What's all this?" I asked, surveying the somewhat chaotic scene. He looked up from the recipe he was following with intense concentration. "I realized I've never cooked for you, not once in 3 years. It seemed like something I should learn how to do." The simple admission that he recognized this imbalance in our relationship and was actively trying to address it touched me more deeply than grand gestures or dramatic declarations could have. "Need any help?" I offered. "Absolutely," he admitted with a self-deprecating laugh. "I've already burned the first batch of garlic and nearly set off the smoke alarm." We worked side by side, preparing a simple pasta dish that ended up being surprisingly edible. Over dinner, I told him about the new agreement with Taylor Investments. "Dad must have been furious about paying market rate," Robert observed, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. "He'll survive," I replied dryly. "The deal actually benefits both companies. NextGen gets fair compensation for its technology, and Taylor Investments maintains access to a critical component of its growth strategy." "Look at you. Being diplomatic?" "About my father," Robert teased. "A week ago, you would have celebrated his concession more openly." I shrugged. "The satisfaction of winning means less than the value of the agreement itself. This isn't about beating William Taylor. It's about building NextGen's future." Robert studied me with newfound appreciation. "You really are remarkable, you know that? All this time, I never fully saw it." "Because you weren't looking," I said simply. "I'm looking now," he promised. The days that followed established a new rhythm between us. Robert began exploring potential business ventures, leveraging connections outside the Taylor circle to identify opportunities that aligned with his own interests rather than the family legacy. I focused on integrating ecotech into NextGen's operations, expanding our client base, and developing new applications for the technology platform. The media attention gradually faded as other business stories took precedence, though occasional features about the Taylor who walked away kept Robert's decision in the public eye. William and Elizabeth maintained a chilly distance, communicating through lawyers and intermediaries rather than directly engaging with either of us. Jessica, however, became an unexpected bridge, visiting our apartment for coffee, sharing family news, establishing a relationship with me independent of my marriage to her brother. 1 month after Robert's resignation, as we shared a quiet Sunday breakfast, he broached the subject of our future again. "I've been looking at apartments," he mentioned casually. "Found a place in Brooklyn that I like. Nothing fancy, but it has good light for working from home." I nodded, acknowledging the unspoken message. He was preparing to move out, to give me space, to continue his journey of independence whether or not our marriage survived. "That sounds nice," I said. "When would you move?" "Lease starts next month," he replied. "I wanted to give you plenty of notice." I set down my coffee cup, meeting his gaze directly. "Before you sign anything, I've been thinking about us, about where we go from here." His expression remained carefully neutral. And I think I'd like to try again. Not picking up where we left off, but starting something new. Something based on who we are now, not who we were before. Hope flickered in his eyes, but he controlled it. "Are you sure? I don't want you to feel obligated because of everything that's happened." "I'm not," I assured him. "This isn't about obligation or pity. It's about seeing a version of you that I could build a real partnership with, equal, honest, independent of the Taylor expectations." "I'd like that," he said simply, "more than I can express." "It won't be easy," I warned. "We have a lot of patterns to break, a lot of history to work through." "I know," he agreed, "but I think we're worth the effort." I reached across the table to take his hand. "So do I." The gold digger they had imagined never existed. The woman who emerged instead, strong, capable, unwilling to be diminished, had built her own success, on her own terms. And the man who had finally freed himself from his family's control was discovering who he truly was, separate from the Taylor name and fortune. Whether our marriage would succeed in its new incarnation remained to be seen. But sitting across from Robert that morning, both of us changed by the truth we had finally confronted. I felt something I hadn't expected. Optimism. Not because we had defeated the Taylors or proven them wrong, though there was undeniable satisfaction in that, but because we had each found our own path forward. Together or apart, we had reclaimed our power from those who had tried to define us on their terms. And that, more than any business triumph or social vindication, was the true victory. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.